as a professional guy, I wasn't really trying to find like somebody online. Individually, I like to build things. I like to accomplish things. I want to make things like different types of energy sustainers to use them for to collect different types of charges corresponding to the mass ejections that the galactic center makes in our solar system. Our solar system, or the galactic center, always releases different types of gray matter. I think I told you about this in one of my other videos. But the gray matter that it releases is always a specific charged frequency and or current into these clusters of atoms and or charged particles. These charged particles obviously have a direct notation of coordinates and lots of things. Exotic phase matters corresponding to the electronic current like ripples that can help us a lot in a lot of different ways. So the galactic center is always going to be active, and sustaining these different types of collectations of the excitation energies from the gray matter release would always be constant. So depending on the type of release, we get to collect different types of excitations, and it will always make these different, you know, ejections towards the planet, um, like randomly all throughout the cycle of a light year. Sadly, we can't get the full light year and or the full radius of light. If we could, we wouldn't be orbiting around a sector of the sun. We only get a sector, so we only get regions in or sectors of magnitudes as we travel along the trajectorized paths of Earth's distance. Since Earth's distance will always be the same distance, you have to realize that we only get a ratio and a quantity of the sunlight. So since we only get a ratio of sunlight, it would only be a small quantum gravitational current from using the oceans and the core that we would only sustain the amount of stirring of the magnitude regions around that time. Besides the things that are carried on inside Earth's electromagnetic field, everything that would new entering electromagnetic field would be X-ray light or current light, which would be large clouds carrying these currents to sustain the collection through from the electronic ground to the sky, and in between. So it's kind of complex. Oh, sorry, doc. To get to the continuing of constant gravitational contact, because without the current or the plasma sources on the ground, it's kind of complex for new storing of electronic frequencies or electronic waves to make their electronic configurations, um, because there's nothing that would keep the ground current on electronic ground, because people on the ground only sustain everything that's like, everything that's into their everyday lives under the clouds, which has nothing to do with anything um, sustaining constant gravitational contact from sustaining these different exotic phase matters of different types of charges and or charged particles. Their attractions can be found in many different ways. Obviously, we can make different types of electromagnetic interactions and or detections of space as we travel around these different sectors of the sun. Or we can either make satellites to collect different quantities of space to collect different sectors around different sectors of the sun. So we have the full radius, but again, Earth is only around a sector at a time. So we only get, again, a ratio, and the ratio of the spin current of gravity would be its shadow effect, and its shadow effect is a small ratio. So you have to think about how different the storing of space and time would be for our planet corresponding to its gravity, because again, people like to spend their time on, like, everything that's like it's the economy, or everything that just keeps them around the people that they're be happy with, corresponding to the forward's access. So it keeps you pretty content on the things that are just here, and like the lively effect on how it keeps us happy, but constant gravitational contact and sustaining these or harnessing these different new or linear contacts that transfers past our planet, or go through and either get sustained or not sustained, would just be the work it takes to try to harness these things. So I was thinking about making like over 1,000 different types of like dish type interactors, different types of computers, different types of these cool things that would have an inverse. I could show you one of my one of um, my tools someday, you know, like computers that can do things like analyze different parts of the atmosphere, or analyze, you know, it's a vacuum chamber that can just vacuum air or oxygen outside of your house, and it will constantly be vacuuming the air. You would see the carbon dioxide that goes through the vacuum chamber, and make different types of storing effects of the carbon dioxide, and or transferring it to like this freezing chamber. And like you see the other chemical quantities that are in our atmosphere besides phosphorus, nitrogen, and oxygen, and you know, I mean, obviously other things too. You see like chemical effects from the plants and all these other things that are in our atmosphere that nobody ever sees, and it's all invisible. I mean, like, really, it was really used for mining, though, like, because a lot of gases get released during earthquakes and or volcanic interactions and um, or mining. And so I thought about how could we know whenever you know, these gas leaks exit out wherever we're mining, was this little vacuum, or this vacuum detector that would constantly, you know, use this huge turbine pretty much, and it goes through these series of sensors and detectors, and it analyzes every single particle that goes through that vacuum, and we can do a lot of cool things with the sensors and the particle container, and like how we can store different types of gases that go through the chambers, and by freezing them in like these super cool temperatures. So it's thermodynamics, and you know, it'd just be great. It'd be great, you know. So it was just one of the ideas I had, and besides the thousands of satellite dishes and or satellites that I wanted to make by making or finishing my company to finish building these things. Obviously, I need to produce or provide products so I can finish building my things, my bigger projects. The smaller things, like if you just want to hang out or something, we can make our own dish, or you know, just seeing different currents in the backyard or something, or like, you know, find some land and just do some things. We can explore some storms, you know, but like again, like that's another thing that I could talk about, because I already talked about the ejections of the galactic center. So the storm's quantities, and or the spin current that makes these different types of magnetizations corresponding to the the Earth's core and its magnitude phases, so where the excitation cells catches the clouds and excite the rainfall or the mass fall and the electric current to make it rain, you know, and make and or just make it extremely electrostatic corresponding to the core. The core will have its magnitude phases, and it will either redirect the clouds, and or make it, you know, make these different effects and make different magnitudes to space. Because of the big magnet over our head, the magnitudes will indicate different types of charges, making either ground contact or linear contact into our atmosphere. Since since these charges inside of these gas containers would be thermal-like, or corresponding it, or having its magnitude phases and vacuum phases, which every gradient in or every charge storm would do something different to our atmosphere and our planet. It could either be like if there was a mass ejection and there was like a magnitude phase with the core exciting these cells of the clouds, these different types of contacts could make ground contacts to the electronic ground, and either, you know, travel through these phase matters throughout the four states of matter. See, as you see, the four states of matter is constantly is an excitation source of hydrogen. So since these different things are coming from hydrogen and a center of our solar system, and they're going through these different these wave transfers on our planet and its sides, would make it, let's see how different these magnitude phases of the core make these storm reactions. I mean, some people might think it's the climate change, or the climate change just changed the thermodynamic reactions of these different sectors of the planet corresponding to its thermal translations throughout the previous spin currents in the past. So since the spin current could be like, you know, in many different ways corresponding to the axis of the planet, um, you know, in its magnitude phases, we're widely exploring storms and our weather in these ways that we've never even imagined. And or it was like that in another sector of the planet, and now it's like that in another sector today. because the transition of the electronic ground corresponding to the axis of the planet, the transition of the electronic ground would make different magnitudes, and these different magnitude phases would obviously be corresponding to either the sun, galactic center, or the planets behind us, and or space-like interaction from the universe. Although our star dominates the magnetic field of that we're inside, we're inside the star's magnetic field, all of the planets, all 8 of them. So we're all inside this huge, big, giant field that's orbiting a different sector of the intergalactic center, collecting these different magnitude phases and their spin currents, storing these spins and or phases of these different types of phase matter interactions. Since the charge will always be different every day, we'll constantly, if you think about how we constantly make new contact, would be like the flares, the really powerful flares. They always break bonds, and they try to make new ones. So it's bond breaking to make new bonds, and or I mean, there are different types of the different flares and their flare-like interactions. Don't really they all have different effects. There are like thousands or millions of different types of flare-like interactions that will make a different type of dynamic to the sector in response to that's around that different sector of the flare, and or that's catching the ratio at a different angle. Because the galactic center, all the planets you get the flare, and or so it's not really just bond breaking and bond making. It's a lot more to it, and it's just sustaining nuclear distances because like the X-rays, obviously going past like everything on the surface, and we're only seeing our bones. Just like the storms, where we have our nuclear X-ray lightning, like the lightning that gets really big, and not only have linear contact in the sky, but ground contact. That would be an X-ray into our atmosphere corresponding to the storm's nuclear phases. The storms have a lot of nuclear phases. Obviously, I made a lot of things to explore these nuclear phases in the past. I thought they were pretty cool. Interacting with the clouds and stuff, doing these different things. It was things I did years ago. Collecting different types of lightning over the years and over the storms. But I can talk about it later. Again, this video is getting really long, and I don't really like carry on talking about things too long. If you're kind of trying to make it short, but I can talk for hours if you ever want to. We can talk about anything from the different types of currents and the large currents and the other gas planets. Like they're since it's like either like liquid metal. I can talk about the satellite dishes and stuff like that. But I mean, you have to understand that they'll all be made differently. They're not just going to be like a big dish. Someone can make made out of like different material, or sustained plasma, or like different type of metal-like material that would bend electromagnetic frequencies differently because it's in liquid form from plasma of high heat of a thermal state of high heat, and or just like in another thermal state where it just melts, and you can use it to obtain different types of electromagnetic frequencies differently. So we can make our robots really intelligent from their bending of the electromagnetic force with these tools to be really cool. Again, back to the gas planets though, whenever I was talking about their container, electric current container, and how large the energy or the X-ray like interactions could be corresponding to their strong storms because they're huge as fuck. Since they're so big and their energy sustainment is so huge, like their lightning can go through one side to the other side of the planet and like spatter out many different ways. That is larger than Earth type of like X-rays that release radiation, and their storms are visible all of the time. And like you would see maybe a quantum spin corresponding to that magnitude that made that storm apparent to the surface. Since it was a nuclear charge, that was like a visible charge that indicated a gravitational torque or a gravitational pull from space to make a spin current, or feeding the core of their planet. It's these different dynamic interactions or charge interactions of what the galactic center is making and or releasing. So what the gas planets store would be a lot a lot of different things in or quantities of space that nobody would even imagine, because it's so huge and how much quantities of space it takes up storing these different types of charged particle interactions and or elemental interactions and or bond phases. I mean, its radiation can sustain so many different things that it's really cool, and we can interact with them and or make these different things around them that could like just be a dynamic on its own. So again, I'm not trying to talk too much. I'm trying to just get through with the video. It's almost at 19, so hey, I'll talk to you sometime. Hopefully you enjoyed the video.